Hey girls, this is Coach Sydney. I made this video about what a 6-2 offense is for our team, so know that everything you see in here is going to be completely relevant to you guys. Many of you may have never heard of a 6-2 offense, but it's something that allows a team to set from the back row of the court. It stands for a team that has 6 hitters and 2 setters. Every player on the court is able to be a hitter with this kind of offense. The 6-2 is probably going to be a little different from how you've played before. Rachel and I will be selecting 2 players on our team to be our setters. This means not every player will be a setter. The 6-2 allows us to do this, and you'll be able to see how that works later in the video. Also, we can always have 3 hitters in the front row because our setter will always be in the back row. Before we get into too much detail, I want to make sure everyone understands what the difference between serve-receive and defense is. Serve-receive is when the other team is serving the ball to us. Defense is any time the other team has the ball or is sending the ball over other than when they are serving. During serve-receive, there are 3 passers in the back row, and our setter will never take the first ball. And we try to bring the setter as close to right front as possible, and I will explain this soon. On defense, the setter might actually pass the first ball. They stay in the back row until they either pass or know that they aren't going to pass, and at this point, the setter will run to right front and get ready to set. This image here is important to understanding the base of what a 6-2 offense is. Here we have 6 players on the court. As said before, we will have 2 designated setters. These are the S players. Remember, the setter always sets from the back row, so in this rotation, the blue S1 player is the setter. The green S2 player is a hitter. I have them labeled as S so you can remember they will eventually be setters, but I have S2 in green so you remember that player is a hitter right now. The 2 setters will always be opposite of each other, so that one is always in the front row and one is always in the back row. The H players here represent hitters. All players can be considered hitters in a 6-2. Here is a quick review of the numbered positions on the court. The serving position is 1, and then it goes from there. This is position 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. These numbers will always stay the same. This is complicated but very important. Before the ball is contacted by a server, players have to remain in the position of the court they are at. This doesn't mean they can't move at all, but there are rules about where they can be. What you girls need to remember is that you can't pass the player directly next to you on either side, and you cannot pass the person directly behind or in front of you. Let me show you what I mean. S1 is in right back. S1 cannot go in front of right front because they are directly in front of them. They also can't go to the left of middle back because they are directly next to them. Middle front cannot go behind middle back because they are directly behind them. They can't go to the right of right front because they're right next to them. And they can't go to the left of left front. However, it doesn't matter where they are in regards of this player or this player because they are not right next to them. And that pretty much sums up those rules. So now let's get into it. This is called rotation 1. It is the rotation where the first setter is in right back. S1 is the setter in this rotation because she is the setter in the back row. The other team is serving the ball, and the 6-2 changes where people are on the court during serve-receive. So, to begin, I will emphasize the number 1 goal of serve-receive in every rotation. Get the setter as close to right front as you possibly can. So how do we do this? Well, because we don't want our setter to ever pass the first ball, we can move her out of the back row. This is what that looks like. Notice how the setter stays behind the hitter directly in front of her. This is because of those rules we talked about in the previous side. The setter cannot go in front of that player until the server serves. Also notice how there is now a gap in right back. We need to fix this because remember, we always want 3 passers on serve-receive. So now we have to move some other players around, and this is what that looks like. Middle back moves over to the right back to cover that gap. But remember that middle back can't go to the right of right back, so she has to stay on this side of that setter. Now we need to fix these other gaps. Left front moves back to pass. Remember, since she is in front row, she can't go behind the player directly behind her. To finish, we have the hitter who doesn't get pulled up or back, and she moves to the 10-foot line. Remember, it doesn't matter that this player goes behind the setter because they aren't directly behind or in front of each other. Something I want to point out that I won't be physically showing in this video is what happens once the ball is served. As soon as that ball comes over the net, The setter will move to right front so she can set, and all the hitters here are going to move back. This is so the setter can be ready to set and the hitters can be ready to hit. All right, we're at rotation 2 now. Notice that the two setters are still opposite of each other. They will always be this way. Again, our goal is to get the setter as close to right front as possible. As you look at this, ask yourself, where are we going to move players here? To make it easier, the setter will always pull up the player directly in front of them. So this is what that looks like in rotation 2. Remember, S1 cannot go in front of S2, so she has to stay behind them until the serve is made. When the setter is in middle back, left front will always come back to pass. And again, the last hitter comes back to the 10-foot line. After the ball is served, S2 will come back to hit, S1 will go to set, and this hitter stays here. All right, rotation 3. Again, notice that the setters are still opposite from each other. Ask yourself, where do you think the setter is going to go? As said before, we will always pull the setter up to the player directly in front of her. Remember, S1 cannot go in front of this player. Now let's fill the gaps. Middle back cannot go to the left of the setter. And right back cannot go to the left of this player, which isn't a problem here. Bringing that hitter back, remember, she cannot go behind this player. And let's bring that player back so they can pass. Notice that this front row player is behind this back row player, but it doesn't matter because they are not directly in front of or behind each other. All right, so now we are in rotation 4, which is when S1 moves to the front row and S2 moves to the back row. This means that S2 is now our setter. In this rotation, we do exactly what we did for rotation 1. Everything is exactly the same for each setter. Moving on from serve-receive, we can now talk about defense. Defense is played anytime the other team has the ball after the first serve. The goals of defense are to get ready for the ball to come over the net. In defense, our 3 front row players will stay at the net until the ball comes over. As soon as that ball does come over, those 3 front row players will move off the net so they can get ready to hit. This is called base defense. Base meaning where you stand on the court while the other team has the ball. Notice how I wrote, no matter where the back row setter is. This is how we will always look on the court during defense. As soon as we either serve or send the ball over the net, we need to get the court to look like this. The setter will always go to right back, and whoever is in right back will simply switch places with the setter in the back row. We are allowed to do this because once the ball is served, players can move anywhere on the court. Let's talk about the responsibilities of each of the players on the court here. Most importantly is middle back. As you can see, they are farther back than the other 2 players, S1 and this player. Middle back is in charge of everything behind these players. The 2 wing players, as we call them, are then in charge of everything along this line and everything in front of it. Anything behind that line is middle back's ball. It is important to know that defense is a lot of work and players should never expect a ball to come right to them, and it's important to know what balls you are responsible for. We obviously want S1 to be setting all the time, but in defense, she might actually take the first ball. This is why she stays in the back row while the other team has the ball. But as soon as that ball comes over the net, we want to move some players. Let's assume the setter doesn't pass the first ball. We will talk more in practice about what to do if she does. So as soon as that ball comes over the net and the setter knows she isn't passing the first ball, she needs to quickly get to right front. As she does this, all 3 front row hitters need to move off the net so that they can be ready to hit. This is called transitioning, and you will hear that a lot. This is so important, so make sure you watch that a few times. So that basically sums up all of the basics of serve, receive, and defense while running a 6-2. Let's review. We run a 6-2 offense so that we can always have 3 front row hitters, and so that our designated setter can set from the back row. As we mentioned, every time the ball comes over, whether it's a serve or on defense, any front row players that are on the net come off. This is called transition. During serve receive, the goal is always to have the setter as close to right front as possible. Remember, we do this by having the setter push up the front row player directly in front of her. In this type of offense, we will have 2 setters on the court at all times. Yes, this means 2 players on our team may get to play more than other girls. But being a setter isn't easy. It is a very important and difficult task. Rachel and I will be making that decision based on many things and what's best for our team. That's all we have for you. Thank you for taking the time to watch it, and I hope this helps our team get ready to succeed in running this offense. We know that was a lot of information, and we will be doing all of this in practice so much with you to get you ready. Please come to practice with questions for us about this, and watch it again if you are totally confused. Thanks, girls. See you next Monday.